The Cardinals simply can't leave Victor Scott II off the opening day roster, right? What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. And the conversation surrounding the final spots on the Cardinals' opening day 26-man roster is really heating up in the home stretch now of spring training. Today, we're going to dive into Victor Scott after another nice performance for the Cardinals on Wednesday afternoon in spring training. But before we get to the meat and potatoes, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by my guy Kevin Foley with Universal Windows Direct. For over 20 years, Universal Windows Direct has been upgrading homes across St. Louis, but if you want the best in the business, you need to talk to Kevin. With expert advice, unbeatable deals, and a passion for perfect windows, Kevin will help you find the perfect fit for your home. Right now, if you buy 2 windows, you'll get 2 free. Plus, ask about special financing offers. Don't wait either. With the recent storms in the area, now would be a great time to give Kevin a call or a text at 618-520-1234 today to schedule your free estimate. And you'll be saying, I love my windows. With Universal Windows Direct, Kevin Foley. Check out the phone number again right there on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. All right, so I'm actually recording this episode a little earlier Wednesday afternoon, releasing it Wednesday night, but Victor Scott has already made his mark on the game as of this recording. He's 1 for 4. We'll see if he takes another at bat. It doesn't say that he's been replaced yet in this game. But a home run for Victor Scott on Wednesday. He's hitting .359 for the spring with an 1149 OPS as of this recording. And my goodness, when you look at his numbers last year, he was not a guy that you really felt at the big league level was primed to do very much in the power department. Ended up with a .283 slug and just a .502 OPS in his 155 big league plate appearances last year. And it's interesting, like he struggled at Memphis as well. As much as this conversation surrounding Victor Scott and his tremendous spring is exciting, it's not crazy necessarily if you're the Cardinals to say, are we sure that this guy doesn't need more seasoning in AAA? Because the numbers last year were not productive. But we've seen plenty of instances of players maybe sort of topping out, which I don't know that this would be the case for him, just in his age 23-year-old season last year. But guys kind of topping out at AAA and then almost needing that jolt to the big leagues to allow them to really capitalize on their capabilities and play at the highest level. Like there's a case to be made that Victor Scott II is going to be a Showtime type of player who is going to show up when the lights are brightest this year in the big leagues, rather than stashing him back at AAA and maybe risk losing some of the positive momentum and the positive mindset and confidence that he has built in spring. Again, I think as we talked last year, I was never worried that if they brought him up right away, which they ended up doing in 2024, and he struggled, which ended up happening, I was never worried that that was going to cause a delay to his development or that it was going to ruin his development as a player in some way, shape, or form. I couched him to be the confident type of player that would learn from his experiences, grow from them, and bounce back. And it looks so far this spring that that's what he's doing. And we're seeing some of that power stroke as well, as he has hit a few home runs already in spring. That's impressive to me. It's his 3rd home run of the spring, hit in the game on Wednesday. And like I had said off the top, that wasn't really an element of his game that he possessed last year at the big league level. And even at the minor league level, just 6 home runs in 362 plate appearances. He's got 3 home runs in spring in fewer than 50 plate appearances. So that tells me that he's definitely in a better place offensively. The question is, what do the Cardinals do about it? Because the way he is performing, if this is a year where you are incentivized as an organization to prioritize the development and the growth of young players, this is a player that you try to strike while the iron's hot. You capture lightning in a bottle. Every little idiom or saying or phrase that you want to go with, put it out there for Victor Scott II, because this is the time to get him in the lineup and to have him play every single day. And frankly, if you're really trying to boost the confidence of a young player like this, you consider putting him in the leadoff spot. I know that Mason Wynn is kind of in a boat where he's had a sluggish spring, so you maybe moving him down in the order could serve to hamper his confidence in some way, shape, or form. But again, you're talking about 2 confident guys that I think wherever they are in the batting order, they're going to get their opportunities and they're going to do the most with them that they possibly can. But I also think there is something to be said for the way that Victor's swinging the bat right now. You get him up there, and he's the guy that leads off the game for you with the speed that he can bring to the table. So I would find that to be really compelling. I don't know if the Cardinals will do it. I don't know if they feel they can do it because of sort of the number of players that are for lack of a better phrase, ahead of Victor Scott in line for opportunities to show what they can do at the big league level. The competition is not between Lars Nootbaar and Victor Scott II, and it's really not any longer between Michael Ciani and Victor Scott II. I don't think Ciani is going to be in a regular starting role with the Cardinals. Even if he makes the team, I think you'll see him out there maybe a couple times per week at most. But it seems that with the way that Victor Scott is performing, if you're going to leave that caliber of a spring effort off the roster, despite the way that he's played, I think it has to be because you're going in a different direction with your lineup. It's not because you're picking another defense-oriented center fielder above him, a guy in Ciani who has not performed and has been dealing with illness this spring. I'm a fan of Michael Ciani's game. I don't think you can possibly tell me that he has earned the center field job on opening day with what we have seen relative to Victor. So that, to me, is not really even the competition to discuss. It's a decision more so than a competition. And that's maybe not the fairest thing in the world to Victor Scott, because if it was a competition, he's won it. It's over. But it's not a competition, it's a decision. And the decision lies between what the Cardinals want to do with center field and what they want to do about the playing time for Alec Burleson. I think those are the two factors at play here. It's not difficult to ascertain how it would work if Lars Nootbaar was to play center, because you'd be able to shift Donovan to left, you'd be able to shift Gorman to second, and your DH spot on most days against right-handed pitching would be available for Alec Burleson, who has also had a pretty good spring. The numbers I don't think are quite to the level of Victor Scott. I'll check. And so his spring numbers are actually, they've tailed off a little bit relative to what even I had mentally, but he ends up with the same as Vic, a nice swing today for a home run, his third of the spring. So he's got a 713 OPS in the spring, does Burleson, and I think the caliber of at bat that he takes, the fact that he led the team in homers last year, I could go on and on. This is a coaching staff and a field staff that likes Alec Burleson, wants him in the lineup, and I think he's going to be in the lineup. That is where it gets really difficult to try to figure out what you do with the Victor Scott conundrum, because I can say out of one side of my mouth, this guy deserves an opportunity. There's nothing more for him to do in spring than he's done in order to convince the team that now is the time to bring him up. But by the same token, if you're clinging a little bit to last year and saying, all right, the flash we're seeing right now is great, but we'd like to see him sustain it at AAA before we unleash him into the big league level where we're going to have to play him every single day if he is going to be on this roster, because he's a prospect that needs to continue to develop. That's what he needs to do. And so if you're making that decision to put him on the team, it's not to rest 3-4 days a week. I just don't know that I would be on board with him as a part-time player in the big leagues. You could say, well, some is better than none, but the other way you could look at that is that he's not getting the opportunity to maximize his development. And I can't say that he's one of those players where I would look at his past numbers in the minors and say, well, he's got nothing left to prove at AAA. That's not entirely true. He could prove at AAA that he can produce in the way that he's producing at spring training, so that the Cardinals have an increased level of confidence in him to basically be worthy of these at-bats over somebody like Burleson or over somebody like Gorman. Like if the blame shifts, or if I'm trying to think of a good way to phrase this. If the runway, there's that word again. If the runway shifts at some point to Burleson instead of Gorman, because the Cardinals, if Gorman starts slow, it's going to be a real temptation, I think, for the manager to say, well, I'm not sitting Burleson. And, whatever it is going to be with Gorman is what it's going to be. But do they lose patience with him quicker than maybe all offseason they have said they will? I don't know. That's going to be an interesting test for when push comes to shove during the year. But I think it gets a lot more interesting if you've got somebody like Victor Scott producing, whether that's at the beginning of the season in Memphis, or whether he gets some opportunities in the STL lineup and he's playing well, so you're not going to take him out of there because he's a better defensive option for you than Nootbaar. And I think, working his way into clearly being a better offensive option than Michael Ciani. He wasn't last year, to be totally clear. Vic had a 502 OPS last year. Ciani was, I think, around 570 in the big leagues. So with what we have seen in terms of the data over a full season, you can't even say that Victor has definitively surpassed Ciani, but I think we've all held the opinion that the upside for Victor Scott offensively is higher than what Ciani brings, which I hate to minimize a player like that. I'm not telling you Ciani has no upside, but certainly right now it's a difficult argument to make that he is capitalizing on whatever upside he may possess. I don't like to put players into boxes and to limit them by saying he can't do X, Y, or Z, because I'm of the mind that these guys are out there to prove themselves, and he could certainly do it. But we just haven't seen Siani do it, and right now we're watching Victor Scott do it on a regular basis. Lars Nootbaar is doing it. Again, Lars Nootbaar is going to be in this lineup. He should be in the first 2 spots in the lineup. He's going to bat first or he's going to bat second, in my opinion, because the way he's swinging the bat right now, scoff as you may about some of the comparisons that are made about Lars Nootbaar with his metrics and trying to put it all together this year, a healthy Lars Nootbaar this season, swinging the bat like he has over the past few days, you could be witnessing Lars Nootbaar's, turn into an all-star caliber player the way that it has seemed for years that we've been waiting to see. He was 2 for 3 today, at least as of this recording in the later portions of the game. Had a couple of runs scored and a walk as well. He's OPSing 952 for the spring. Contreras, by the way, OPSing 1100 for the spring. I hope you got Wilson on your fantasy team because he is potentially ready to be a total monster. Speaking of total monster, Ivan Herrera is OPSing 1200 for the spring. I'm just putting it out there, gang. Like, as much as we've kind of poo-pooed this offense throughout the spring, some of the guys that are starting to turn it around or who have maybe been quietly doing a nice job all along, you look at Nootbaar, Contreras, and Ivan Herrera as 3 of your regulars. Those guys are all crushing the ball this spring. Be very interesting to see what ends up happening there. And then Victor Scott, obviously, with his OPS over 1100. So we'll see, man. I've been more on the optimistic side, even as things have gone poorly throughout portions of this spring. And some of that's been the pitching, some of it's been the hitting. By the way, the pitching, 6 innings of 1-run baseball today from Steven Matz. He's 2.29 ERA for the spring. If he ends up making the $11 million a year worthwhile right at the bell here for the Cardinals in year 4, that would be another notch in there, feather in their cap. I think that's the phrase. Stranger things have happened, man. And so I look at the Cardinals and I say, I think there's a world in which this actually could be, again, maybe not predicting that they're going to make the playoffs, but a world in which it's worth playing this thing out and to stop the faux notion that the wins and losses don't matter. This is a rebuild. It's not. It has no reason to be a rebuild other than ownership felt it needed to save some money. That doesn't mean there's not talent on the team. I think there's a lot of guys with something to prove this year. We'll see whether Victor Scott is one of those guys who, after proving it in spring, gets an opportunity to prove it in the regular season to begin the year. Last year he had a good spring and then was not able to follow it up. But it's very difficult when you look at what Victor Scott is doing to not pay attention and to not want to see what that, because he's an exciting player. That's the other thing the Cardinals need is they need more of his brand of baseball. Impeccable defense, run the bases, but also be able to hit some nukes. Victor Scott could be that 5-tool type of player. I'm not saying he's going to be a guy to hit 20 homers in a year. He's on pace to kind of have that level of production in the spring. Like I said, fewer than 50 plate appearances, 3 homers. You do a little quick math, 6 homers for every 100 plate appearances, give him 600. Suddenly he's a 30-homer guy. I don't think he's going to be that at the big league level, but could he be a 15 to 18 home run guy with 25 to 30 steals if he's playing every day and develop into a Gold Glove caliber defender simply with his raw abilities? I think he's going to continue to learn to become more of a veteran center fielder, to be able to have, I think he's got great instincts. I think he's just got to hone those instincts defensively in center field to become that guy. I think that's right there for the taking for Victor Scott. There is a lot to like about Victor Scott II. If I were king of the world, or if I were John Mozeliak, some way or another, Victor Scott would be on my team. I would have him in the lineup on opening day, but I also am one of those who doesn't believe that Nootbaar in center field is the best course of action in the short term or the long term. I think defensively, it's better to have him in left. It's better defensively to have Donovan at second than it is Gorman, and it's better to have Gorman as a DH. At a certain point with certain guys, I'm ready to give up on, well, it doesn't really matter what he does defensively. Can he rake or can he not rake? Let Gorman bat, and if he rakes, I don't care where he is defensively, and I feel the same way about Burleson. Those two guys can fit into that DH spot. The challenge is certainly going to be, are there enough at-bats to go around? My belief is that while it does make Oliver Marmol's job much more difficult to put Victor Scott on the team, and I hate to say it, but I think it would be Siani's spot that he takes, which I don't love either because I think he could have value off the bench defensively. But Siani can't play shortstop. and they're going to have somebody who can be utility off the bench to play shortstop. And my other bench spots are Luke and Baker. Like, I would have Luke and Baker over Ciani on the team because I think his right-handed bat off the bench, some late pop threat for matchup purposes against lefty tough relievers, is more valuable than the defensive replacement that you could bring into the game with Ciani, and it's also a pinch runner opportunity with Ciani if he's not your starter but is on your bench. But I don't know how often that's going to be utilized. I think it's more of a benefit when you're up by 1 run or 2 run in the 7th, 8th, 9th inning to use Ciani in that way. I think Luke and Baker could be used in a variety of situations, up or down, to help the offense. Last year, they prioritized defense in a lot of regards, and this year it may be shifting in the other direction. But with your bench, I would think if you put Vic on, it's, again, I think Burleson's going to play a ton, so how you structure the at-bats, I don't know. But I think it's Burleson as your 10th player. And again, Scott is in center every day. Pages as your 11th player, you get 13. So Pages is the backup catcher. He's still going to catch 50, 60-plus games. I'm just letting you know. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's probably because Herrera really developed defensively like they wanted to see from him. But I still think you're going to see plenty of Pedro Pages. They like him, and he'll play, every 3rd to 4th day. Nevertheless, the other spots on your bench for me would be Luke and Baker. He's raked this spring. It would just be asinine for the Cardinals to not have Luke and Baker on this team. And then the other spot is somebody that has to be able to play shortstop in a pinch and is a utility guy ideally. And I think Jose Fermin's going to win that spot. It was reported by one outlet that Barrero is being optioned to Memphis. I don't know if that's officially happened. As of this recording, the Cardinals have not officially announced that, but it may come after the game today. Who knows? It's one of those things where it might, for whatever reason, it might be reported behind the scenes, but you make sure like Jose Fermin doesn't get injured starting at shortstop today in the spring game, and then maybe the roster move happens. But Fermin's never played a big league inning at shortstop. That's why I was skeptical that they would do it that way. But with Barrero, he's not on the 40-man roster. So that would have been a reason for skepticism for the Cardinals to have him on the opening day team, because they don't like making 40-man moves when they can avoid it. They just drag their feet on 40-man moves. That I don't even know if that's a criticism so much as it is a fact of life. John Mozeliak has historically just not been very proactive with 40-man moves. And look, at times it's frustrating. At other times there's probably valid reasons behind it, but that's just the fact of the way the Cardinals typically approach things. Barrero could play some outfield, could play some shortstop. I thought would have been a nice fit. Has had a good spring. Fermin has had a good spring offensively. I just have never seen the big league coaching staff and manager trust him to play an inning of shortstop. And it may be that he doesn't have to play very many innings of shortstop if Mason Wynn can play 150, 155 games. But that for me right now would be probably that last spot on the bench. Hellman has been optioned. Barrero, if he ends up getting optioned, then that would be the way that shakes out. So what that would mean is it is kind of a Victor or Ciani question on the roster. The reason you would go Ciani over Victor on the 26 is because Nootbaar's playing center field 5+ days a week. And if he is, that means the leftovers for Scott is not sufficient for his prospect status. I saw the article from Lynn Worthy, who does a great job with the Post-Dispatch. I don't really agree with the premise, though, that he has hit too well to get to be on the big league team and ride the bench, because the way I view Victor Scott is through that prism of he's a prospect, and so he, regardless of his spring, the outcome of him being on the bench was just never going to happen. I just don't think it ever would have made sense for him to make the team. Like, oh, he's better than Ciani this spring, he gets that bench spot. No, I mean, if it's a spot that's going to get to see 4, I think you want 5+ for Victor Scott in the lineup, and that's going to be hard to find without conceding some on Gorman, conceding some on Burleson, and maybe those guys end up platooning, and Scott doesn't as much to try to find, he can play against lefties because he's going to have to be able to hit either or, and historically Gorman, Burleson have not been great against lefties. I say historically, last year that this was the case. I don't think Burleson was as splitty the previous season, but I can't recall. But in either case, the Cardinals would have to find, and it would be a challenge for Ollie Marmol to find it. But that's why it could be easier to have Ciani on the team than Scott, is because you can have Ciani on the bench and you don't have to prioritize his playing time, as much as that might not sound like a very nice thing to say. I think to stay around in the big leagues for 10 years, I think the best thing Ciani can do is learn to be that fourth outfielder and thrive in the role. Defensive replacement, not miss a beat. Even if you didn't play the first 7 innings, you're Gold Glove caliber for the next 2. Because he's got to be able to carry the bat with him to justify it, at least on a contending team, to justify. He could win a Gold Glove in this league if he gets 150 starts in a season. I just don't know that the Cardinals or contending teams can justify starting him 150 games unless he gets that OPS to start with a 6, or at least get it back to starting in the high 5s like it did last year. I just think it's hard to carry too many, not only a defense first player, but if his OPS is 500 like his and Victor's was last year, you're more of a defense only player, not defense first, but defense only. And that doesn't really fly at the big league level. So I think the best thing for Siani could be to be a guy who actually appears in 140, 150 games, but it's as a pinch runner, it's as a defensive replacement, it's as a spot starter, and trying to, carve out his niche there. I don't know if I'm not saying that's the limit to what he could do, but I think the Cardinals have a player right now that is trying to show you that his limitations are not nearly as present on the surface right now. Whatever limitations Victor Scott may show to have over the course of time, right now I think you lean into what the limitless nature of the way he is performing, and you put him on the team. That's what I would do. He would be my opening day center fielder. I would have Nootbaar in left. I would have Donovan at second. I think it just benefits your defense so tremendously. I don't have an answer, though, to exactly how you put Burleson in the lineup and Gorman in the lineup every day. Frankly, and this is, this is going to sound a little bit bizarre. I don't know, and before I say this, let me do one quick piece of research to make sure that from where we're coming from. Last year, Nolan Arenado played in 152 games. Trying to see how many games he started, but I would imagine it was around 151 games he started last year. His defense is unbelievable. I still think he's an incredible defender. His offense over the course of his career has been tremendous. If he's actually one of the guys that plays 6 out of 7 instead of 7 out of 7, which again, last year he only started 151, so he basically kind of had 11 days off last year. If he has 20 days off this year and you start to bake that in a little bit early to keep him fresh for the long haul, but also, have it be a case where he wanted to leave. Now let me backtrack. That's not fair to him. The Cardinals approached him about leaving because of the situation they had. He was amenable to it and gave him a list of teams and said, you can trade me here. And then when they tried, he said, no, not that one. And that frustrated, and basically it blocked the entire Cardinals offseason. And I like Nolan Arenado a lot, but it's a fact. It blocked their entire offseason. Self-imposed because ownership wanted to spend less money. But like the fact of what happened is that's what happened. So I wonder if you say, look, we love Arenado, but if he's performing like he has, 2022 prior, then great. I mean, he starts every single day. If he's performing like he did in 2024, maybe you do bake in a few more Gorman starts at third to try to fit the whole puzzle together with Victor Scott and Burleson and all those guys getting to play. And it's not like you're doing it to piss him off, but it's one of those things where it's like, this was the situation that we were trying to come up with. We love to have you, but we're also maybe going to find ways to, prioritize you at a 95% clip instead of a 100% clip. I don't know if that's even a realistic thing you can do with a veteran player, but also if it happens, again, this is only if he's OPSing 710. If it happens, then I bet next winter or in the summer, if the Cardinals aren't contending and they open up trade talks again in July, I bet he'll say yes to wherever they're going to send him. If it's kind of like, you want to play every day, but also we've got other things we're focusing on. If this team is 10 games under 500 as of, late May, and Arenado is part of the reason why instead of part of the solution, and I'm not predicting he will be. If you ask me right now, I'll tell you he's going to have a 780 or better OPS. Not sure if I'd go 800 or above, but we can hope that that'll be the case. But if it happens the other way, that's another way. You just, unless he starts off raking, you bake in an off day for him 1.5 times every 2 weeks. And maybe you find it that way because that's an extra day and a half a week that both Burleson and Scott can be in the lineup. And the way that works is Gorman shifts to third and opens up DH for Burleson if Donovan's in second base. That's one way to get an extra day. And this would be a needle to thread if you're Oliver Marmol, because MLB players, especially veterans, want to have their everyday role if they're an everyday player. And they want to know what the expectations are, and they want to know where they'll be in the lineup and all these things. They want to know this information. Whether you say it should matter or it shouldn't matter, we're creatures of habit, and baseball players certainly Many of them are creatures of habit. And the ones who have established themselves as veterans, are certainly more accustomed to having that sort of treatment. The other ones, is it fair, unfair, otherwise? I don't know, but you got to scrap sometimes. You got to scrap sometimes if you're a scrapper, and then you earn the opportunity to be one of the protected veterans. That's the way of the world. But I would be interested if you go, okay, we're going to prioritize, and you know what? Maybe we don't get 7 days a week for Gorman. We're going to pick one tough lefty a week to sit him, so he gets 6 of 7, and we're going to sit Arenado once every other week, and so that's another start that we're going to be able to find for Victor Scott and next thing you know, you get to 5, and I think 5 out of 7 would be enough because Scott's going to play 7 out of 7 times, especially if Ciani is in AAA. Suddenly Scott becomes your pinch runner. He becomes your late inning defensive replacement. I think it can work. Will the Cardinals do it? I don't know. I'm starting to think that if I can sit here on a podcast and map all this out, so too can they. So right now, if I leaned, I might have to change my prediction. I just know, too, that it's easier on paper to not have him in there from a perspective of getting the other guys they want to prioritize. But this guy should probably be moving up toward that top of the list in so much as the way he's performing in spring. So let me know your thoughts. We'll know soon enough, I'm sure. I mean, we're just over a week away from opening day. So let me know your thoughts on what the Cardinals should do. Is there a creative way to get everybody in the lineup that needs an opportunity that you see that I haven't talked about? Bring it up. Let me know. And if you want to support the channel, if you want to continue to support my endeavors here on B-Schaeff Daily, consider joining the YouTube membership. The link is in the description. And I'm at bschaefer12 on Twitter. Send me a DM if you want to ask me elements about the support and the membership and what that's all about. And I'll be happy to explain it. Appreciate you guys, though, as always. Once again, check out my guy Kevin Foley, Universal Windows Direct. The number is right there on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.